that she repeatedly mentioned about the Japanese law to protect child victims. That is a new law. As you know, you did make a lot of efforts for the realization of establishment of that Child Protect Act. So the next speaker will be attorney or the lawyer who made the lawyers group to support that network to protect children. I think that for the lawyers we have more younger ones, not we don't see among the scientists who are such younger people who are helping us. But anyway, let's welcome attorney Fukuda, and he will explain about the child condition report, the conditions of the child support and protections. And of course, there are some challenges that she will present in front of you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fukuda. I think you are over-evaluating me, introducing me that way. That from last year, the September, I get involvement with Fukushima from the September last year, or 2 years ago. That time, there were many people who are so indecisive because they could not make a decision if they shall evacuate or they shall stay or they shall do something else. We are attorneys and lawyers. We do not have any scientific background. But even though to us they were coming, the local people came to us and asked us, shall we evacuate, shall we do something about it? As the 2011, 2011, we have formed the lawyers group to support this effort together with, particularly mainly with the younger lawyers. So as lawyers group, we also had a lot of the discussions, and also we did not mean to know everything that we knew. And then I also have attached document that is the copy of this law, the act we have been talking about. I know many people has been talking and seeing this, the monitoring of radiation, and this is as of November of that year. You can see this is the red area is more than 1 millisievert per year. And as you can see, that the radiation spreads not only within the Fukushima prefecture, but many other places throughout Japan. However, what Japan did, as you know, there are two types of the evacuation area the government has classified, and these are the area, the warning area or the alerted area, where the government ordered forced evacuation. And the surrounding that
is called the evacuation area when the urgency or the emergency happened. So they should be prepared all the time to evacuate. And these two are large categories, the government classifications, and they issue the orders in accordance to that. So you see, this is 20 kilometers by diameter, or the radius, sorry, and then, and the secondary evacuation to be evacuated area. And the residents outside of those two circles were not given any kind of advice or alert from the government. I know the former speakers have already spoken about this. The government has been, I would say, the threshold for ordering evacuation is just within when the radiation level exceeds 20 millisievert per year. And in accordance to that criteria, the government has been issuing that warning and alert, the evacuation orders. But as you know, there are certain health effects and health hazards that people has been witnessed, has been evidenced, and what happens to that? Who makes decision on that kind of effects? There are areas is being left out from government's concern or government alert area. They feel that they see some evidences that even though there were no advice, evacuation recommendations from the government, but they started to go out of their area. These people call the voluntary escaped people or evacuated people. Of course, nobody likes to evacuate happily, but because many people evacuated because they had no choice but to evacuate, even though there was no government's order. So I don't really think voluntary evacuation is not really appropriate words to put for them. They are also the victims. As the Dr. Chiba spoke before me, that as of March 11th, that time, there is the Fukushima Prefecture Population Health Control Survey. And among 180,000, 43 thyroid cancer or the higher risk of thyroid cancer. However, the cause and effect evidence is very difficult to prove that the thyroid cancer is because of the Fukushima power plant accident. Just like we heard from Dr. Hoffman about all these arguments over the cause and effect, and Fukushima, people went through the same thing. Actually, if we bring up this case to the court, then that will be very difficult legal fight to prove the cause of such disease. The similar, as like we learned, there was a Minamata disease. Actually, the beginning of last week, there was a Minamata convention meeting at Kumamoto City called the Mercury Control Act, the Control Agreement. This is international agreement that was signed in Minamata. And still now, it is very difficult to recognize and to officially register the person's disease or the symptoms is actually can be identified as melanoma disease. So, of course, the government has said, oh, so we've already overcome melanoma disease issues. Of course not. We have a lot more to do. See atomic bomb disease or the hibakusha of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the same. And under the same conditions. We don't know so much about cause and effect. We don't know so much about what happened to them, what is happening to them, and a lot of work to go. Talking about the children's support activities, I'm not going through one page by one page, and please look at my paper and the information. This year, June, there was this law was adopted anonymously both in upper and lower houses in Japan, a Japanese diet. So the victims of this Fukushima nuclear accident, either they would evacuate some other place for unlimited time period, or they would come back someday, and then government shall support both cases. This is like a livelihood support, and the government committed to do that kind of support. In that characteristics, this law is very unique. Then talking about children who has proven that they expose themselves to the certain minimum level of the radiation, that child is eligible to support the government support for the rest of his or her life. And then also reduction or exemption of medical expenses for the victims. You can see the full wordings of this law in your handout. So please study it later. This law do have weaknesses. There are only policy directions and the principles are stipulated, but no clear concrete criteria or standards are not stipulated yet. So at what level people can get the support, at what level they can apply for the lifelong support. It's not very clear, only this law. We need implementation regulations. So the implementation in which way or for the preference of whom we are all in hands of government. This law was adopted June last year, and year later, 2013 June, we had the press meeting where we said still the exposure is continuing, that is creating the victims. But on the other hand, that law has not been implemented, never put into the force for a year. And I was forced to speak out and say we are going to bring the case to the front of the jurisdiction. So we filed the case to Tokyo District Court August 22, and suddenly, I don't know if it is because of that action or not, but the government moves for the implementations. The September 15th, they came up with the draft implementation law, and the 11th of this month, they passed this implementation law in the diet. So of course that we were very disappointed because they were not really moving towards, the interpreter's mistake, that it was the 11th of this month cabinet decision to support this basic plan for implementation, not yet the diet. So at the Tokyo and the Fukushima, government made the public briefing, and of course the many of the directly affected parties spoke this, the implementation, draft implementation plan is not good enough. But after this hearing from the directly affected people, the government did not reflect that their voices into the draft, and they are trying to submit this to the diet as it was, so that's the first draft, almost the same as the first draft. Talking about the health check. So the Fukushima the Fukushima Prefecture residents health check, in the taken Japanese words, this acronym is KKK, triple case, and this triple case is not enough. Now the voices are raised that we want health check to the people who are living outside, and this is the submitting this to the earthquake recovery agency. What the government response? They said they decided to convene the experts council under the government, and then hear the advice, have them discuss, and then hear the advice and recommendations. They are not set up it yet. They decided to convene them first. I mean, after a month, year and month, 15 months later, that this is what they just did so far. Unbelievable. So of course that this the advisory council, they would be talking about this if the health check is needed for the people living outside of Fukushima, and I think government want the advisory committee to recommend, no, you don't have to do it. I think that is why they decided to convene this advisory committee or the council. And what is the basic plan? I will tell you the contents. The principle say is the essential medical care, and how methodology of that medical care or the contents of that medical care shall be reviewed and considered later. That's what they said. Under the Japanese constitution, the lawmakers in the diet makes the law, then government implements. But in reality, this mechanism seems not working at all. I would say some major challenge or the considerable problem is the very limited geographical area that's identified as the contaminated area. there are a lot of people living in contaminated area. There are a lot of people who are even now thinking of leaving their homes and evacuate. And now I have the local governments. Each local government that area has a system that they would renter private houses and allocate them to the evacuees. And they had this system, but last October they stopped to provide this kind of housings to the evacuated people. And the people who evacuated still ask for the continuation of this system. And this basic plan does not mean the end of everything, and we have to be despaired all the time. But there are still the rooms for the improvement, and there is rooms to have good support for the victims. And I think we need to clarify the clear principles to the government. One is the plan and implementation based on the human rights. Why people had to leave their homes, why people had to be forced to leave at the present conditions. We have to look at these conditions from human rights view, the perspectives. And there are diversified choices that people took. Every choice have to be respected as a human choice, independent human choice. And then the last thing, the contents of basic plan, implementation plan, was just only disappointed for us, but it means that when we look at the Hiroshima and Nagasaki victims, their support movement is still continued so many decades. We shall always be with the hibakshas of Fukushima, the victims of Fukushima, and always be supportive, always put them in the center of the social movement. I think that's very essential. Thank you very much.